Ahsoka episode 6 took a breath from the last 2 episodes, however it didn't waste any time in pushing the overall story forwards, whilst also setting up the possibility for many exciting stories in the future. Buckle up for this one as we break down the 6 key takeaways from episode 6.
In a galaxy far, far away.
Which, by the way, is the episode the whole season has been building towards. Now let's kick off on a positive note, and that's going to be a green box for the new galaxy, which up until now I thought was called Peridia, but it turns out that is just the planet, the homeworld of the Dathomiri before they ventured off into other galaxies, including our own, for example, and settled on Dathomir. But it also turns out that it is the place where the Purgle, the space whales, go to die. It's the end of their migration path, and this can be demonstrated when you can see their carcasses, their remains and skeletons orbiting the planet. But the reason I'm going to give this one a green box today, even though we've only really seen one planet in this new galaxy, is for the excitement, the possibilities that it opens up. We can see a range of new planets that we've never seen before, a range of new heroes, and loads of new villains come to light, but also events within this galaxy that we've never heard of. When I first heard of a new galaxy being introduced into Star Wars, one of my first questions was, do they even know about the Empire, about Palpatine, about Darth Vader? Of course, a section of them will because of Thrawn's arrival most likely, but what about the wider galaxy? There's bound to be planets out there that perhaps are inhabited like to the extent of Coruscant, or planets out there like Camino where they're doing crazy experiments. We'll have to wait and see, but it opens up a lot of possibilities. For all the fond memories we have with planets, for example, like Tatooine, having a new galaxy in Star Wars that we've never seen before does bring back that element of the unknown, of the unexpected, which unfortunately we have lost with Star Wars recently because of all the TV shows and all the movies that we're getting. So it's only natural that that's going to happen. But this new galaxy could act as a way to reverse that. And perhaps we'll learn more about this new galaxy when the Skeleton Crew show drops, because that is said to focus mainly on this new galaxy. However, what we have in Ahsoka is exciting enough for now. We're finally here. We've got Night Sisters around, which is very interesting. The planet, I will say, does look sparse. It is a lot of wasteland. There's not really too much going on there. But to be honest with you, we have a lot of that in the main Star Wars galaxy anyway. But there are hints in this episode of something more sinister going on outside of Thrawn, outside of the Night Sisters. Baylan mentions that there is something out there potentially more powerful calling to him, so we'll have to stay tuned to see what that exactly means, but I have some theories on it and we'll come on to that in a moment. Now going on to box number 2, and it's going to be an orange box for Sabine. Now the whole theme of this show is masters and apprentices, and we've been lucky enough to get Anakin in episode 5 and briefly in episode 4 and maybe in a few episodes to come, who knows. But Sabine is Ahsoka's apprentice, which did surprise many fans, and as a result of that, a big focus in this show is on Sabine. But I have to say, everything that's bad that's happened up until now in this season has been as a direct result of Sabine's actions, for example, losing the map. And then she goes and gives it, once she actually does get it back in her hands, to Baylan to then go and bring Thrawn back from the new galaxy. So for me, Sabine has done a lot in this show that can't really be undone without a lot of blood being spilt. And I will say Sabine's situation is very similar to what Luke went through in The Empire Strikes Back when he left his training early on Dagobah to go and face Vader and save his friends. Sabine's essentially doing the same kind of thing here, although on a much grander scale, because when Luke did it, the Empire was already in control, the galaxy was already at war, but in peace times, with the Imperial remnants pretty much largely scattered and thrown out of the picture, she's went and chucked all of that back into the pot. Now, I will say with Sabine, she's not so much standing with the Empire, but she is now relying on their resources, and perhaps they are going to be her ticket back home. But we do get some cool moments with Sabine in this episode, especially when she's taking on the bandits with the lightsaber. I actually thought in this moment she fared better with the lightsaber than she did with her Mando armor. But when the Great Mothers, the Night Sisters, set eyes on Sabine, they call her dangerous, or they refer to her as it, like she's some kind of creature, that she's not identifiable, but they also say she reeks of Jedi. So perhaps that's evidence that Ahsoka's powers are coming along, or they are more evident than we've been led to believe. Or perhaps a wild theory here, it ties into the realization that she actually fought better with a lightsaber this time around, and I would say for the first time, perhaps her powers are heightened on this new planet, on Peridia. Perhaps her powers aren't related to the Force as such, or the Jedi. Perhaps she is more closely aligned with Night Sister magic than she is with the Force that the Jedi and the Sith use. But I think Sabine's got a long way to go to redeem herself properly, if it's even possible. Now moving on to box number 3, and it is actually going to be for the Great Mothers, and it's going to be a green box yet again. Now, most of the Night Sisters in our own galaxy, the main galaxy, they've been killed off. We've got a few stragglers going around, pretty much like the Jedi. We've got a few here or there surviving, but we learn in this episode that they do come from Peridia originally, and they've just spread out to other galaxies, including our own. They settled on Dathomir, and that's really where they come from, and perhaps we could get more understanding of the magic they possess whilst in this new galaxy, perhaps in Skeleton Crew, and perhaps this magic isn't just for the Night Sisters in this new galaxy, perhaps other beings use it as well. Now, we learn that it was these Great Mothers that actually called to Morgan Elsbeth in her dreams and communicated with her to go and rescue Thrawn. It wasn't Thrawn directly, so Thrawn and Morgan don't have that telepathic or magical connection going on, although you never know, there could be one later on in the show. Now, with the Night Sisters here being on Peridia, it seems like they want, because Thrawn mentions about them being exiled together, they'll now be able to leave and go to the galaxy, the main galaxy. It seems like they're kind of stuck on Peridia as well, which leads me to believe if they're stuck there, then they obviously haven't travelled to our own galaxy, otherwise they'd be over there with the other Night Sisters. Now, is this all the Night Sisters are in it for? Are they just using Thrawn as a resource to get them from A to B? Or do they have an interest in what Thrawn's doing? Are they going to be a part of the new reformed empire when Thrawn does, or when he tries to bring it to power? And potentially they could cause a bigger threat to the galaxy than even Palpatine's empire. You see, because Palpatine largely kept his powers hidden from the public because of his political position, and Vader, not many people actually knew about Vader in the galaxy unless you encountered him. And if you encountered him, you're either an ally of the empire or you ended up dead. It was only later after his death that stories started to spread around of Darth Vader. But these Night Sisters, on the other hand, they're not afraid to use their magic. They likely reanimated them stormtroopers that we see, because if you look at their armor, it's all destroyed and it's been repatched with this gold material, which I will say is the same color as the Eye of Sion, as Morgan Elsbeth's ship, and also as the patching that's done on the Chromera as well, which we'll come onto in a moment. But if you notice, when the stormtroopers speak, they sound like Marok. They don't sound like your typical stormtrooper. They don't have their distinct voices. They sound like Marok. So like Marok was Smoke and he was likely reanimated by Morgan Elsbeth, I think the same could be said for these stormtroopers accompanying Thrawn on Peridia. Now let's get into box number 4, and it's going to be another green one because I really did thoroughly enjoy this episode, and I'll give my score for it in a moment, but it's going to be for Baylan's plan. Now, Baylan and Shin have been some of the best additions to Star Wars in recent years, and they're two of the most interesting, the most intriguing. Baylan, a former Jedi, and you've got his apprentice Shin, who seems to be learning in the ways of the Jedi to a fashion, which can be seen with her Jedi braid. But we learn here that Baylan is actually training her to be more than a Jedi. Now, Baylan's realised over the years that ultimately history is repeating itself. The Jedi come to power, the dark side or the Empire takes over, the Jedi fight back, they come back on top, then the dark side rises again. It's a vicious cycle that keeps going on and on and on. And Baylan, although he didn't understand Order 66 at the time, which he admits, he couldn't get why all of this was happening to the Jedi Order. He was quite young. As he got older, he began to see the flaws in what they were doing. And although he doesn't hate the Jedi, and he likes the idea and he misses the idea of being part of an order, he realises that the Jedi Order was flawed. He's now training Shin to be more. And that comes into his overall plan, which, funnily enough, isn't being a part of Thrawn's new empire. Now, he has a vision to the future, and as he recognises cycles, what better way to break it all than just to leave that part of the galaxy where it's all going on altogether? And he sees Peridia as the ideal place to, I believe, to start some kind of new Jedi Order, perhaps removing what he saw as flaws the last time around. So we get the impression that Baylan has an idea to stay on Peridia. Shin at the moment doesn't seem so sold on the idea because there's not really much going on there. She's still got a lot to see and learn about in her own galaxy, but Baylan's pretty much, I think at this point in time, set on staying on Peridia and rebuilding a version or his version of the Jedi there alongside Shin. But it also seems like Thrawn, although Baylan played an equal part in bringing him back to the galaxy with Morgan Elsbeth, isn't actually sold on him being a part of the Empire's plans either, seeing him as flawed because Ahsoka Tano survived. He's willing to let the two mercenaries, Baylan and Shin, be stranded on Peridia or even die out there, as long as Ezra and as long as Sabine don't cause them any problems and they stay there with him as well. But then there could be a flip side to what Baylan's plan is here. Yes, I think he does want to start an order. He said he misses being part of one on Peridia, but he also mentioned about a power that has been calling out to him, that has been communicating with him. A darker power, possibly even more powerful than what Thrawn can offer him as part of this new reformed empire. Now, Palpatine, when he was alive the first time before he came back again, he was searching for a power that he could fill out there in the depths of space reaching out to him, what many interpreted to be the source of the dark side. Of course, we don't think he ever found it, but what if this is the same power that Baylan has now discovered, and it's likely on Peridia itself? Now, box number 5, and we're going to give it to a newcomer to Star Wars live action. It's going to be a green one. It's going to be for Thrawn. Now, live action Thrawn, it did take me a moment to grasp and get used to, because we're so used to seeing him in animation, although the voice sounded very similar. Of course, Lars Mikkelsen did voice Thrawn in the animated shows, but the version of which he's doing so in live action when he's portraying him does sound a little bit different, but just enough to realise it's still the same guy. Now, it did grow on me the more he was on the screen, but Thrawn as a character, it just shows you being off in this new galaxy in a place that's really untouched from people in our own galaxy. You've got the Great Mothers there. Thrawn demands respect wherever he goes. He's went to someone else's homeworld and they're treating him like he's the boss. It just shows you the sort of character Thrawn is, if perhaps you're not familiar with him if you haven't watched Star Wars Rebels. So allied with the Great Mothers, he's got an army of what I think is undead stormtroopers, but he's also got a right-hand man called Enoch. Now, that is a biblical name. It's a Hebrew name, I believe. Now, Enoch's an interesting one. It is a religious name, and I do urge you to Google a little bit more about Enoch as well, because it is really interesting, and perhaps some of that could play into the character in Star Wars' story. Perhaps that could be a reference of something that's going to happen going forwards. Basically, there was a part of the Bible called the Book of Enoch, which was actually removed from the Bible and other religious texts as well. Now, I'm not too clued up on it, but I will do my homework on it for the next time we talk about Enoch, so I can give you a little bit more information on him. But the English translation of that name is dedicated, trained and disciplined. Now, that sounds exactly like the sort of person you would want standing behind you, especially if you're Thrawn and you're trying to take over a galaxy. One of the most interesting things I thought Thrawn did in this episode was the fact that he sent Baylan and Shin out to stalk essentially Sabine, and I would say this is a wolf tactic where they're stalking their prey before they attack, and they're instructed to attack Sabine and kill her once she finds Ezra, so Thrawn can get rid of both in one go. Now, Baylan and Shin, their names do come from Norse mythology, I believe, where they're named after two wolves, and the fact that he's employed this wolf tactic for them to go and fulfill is pretty interesting. But I don't think Thrawn's only plan is to return to the galaxy and take it over. I think he's got other things up his sleeve. You see, Morgan Elsbeth mentioned about seeing the catacombs, which of course are an underground place of burial, and then it spoke about putting the cargo aboard the ship, which is going to take about 3 rotations, so that's 3 Star Wars days. Is Thrawn trying to take the contents of these catacombs aboard his ship to the current galaxy, to our own galaxy? Now, catacombs being a place of burial, the only thing I can imagine would be down there would be Night Sisters, as it's their home world, it's where they originate from. Are they going to plan on reanimating Night Sisters to take control of the galaxy? Watch this space, but there is definitely something happening with that part that's not being widely spoken about. Now, box number 6 is going to be the final return in this episode, and that's going to be a green one again for Ezra. Now, he's played by Eminis Fandi, who I think actually done a pretty solid job for the limited time we spent with him as a live action Ezra Bridger. It's the second big character to show up in live action in season 1 of Ahsoka, but also all in one episode as well. He's also been exiled on Peridia alongside Thrawn, and we find out that he's been surviving with a new species in this new galaxy called Noti, which are kind of like little hermit crab-like people that wear clothes and live in tin houses, like what I would say is Star Wars caravans, and they move around to survive. Now, we know that Ezra's been living with them, but other than that, Ezra doesn't really give away much on what he's been up to whilst exiled on this new galaxy, or what his mental state really is at this point in time, but we do know that he's looking forward to going home. I think that's up until he finds out Sabine has only got to that new galaxy thanks to the Empire, and the only way they're going to get back, as far as they know, is with Thrawn. I don't think that's going to sit too well with Ezra. Of course, we know Ahsoka's going to show up, but we'll have to see how that all plays out. But overall, I think Ezra's limited time in this episode was good, and I look forward to seeing where his story goes from here. So for the episode as a whole, I do say it is another strong episode. I'll give it a nice 8 out of 10. In my opinion, not as good as the last 2 episodes, but it is really serving a different purpose. This is about getting back on track. Ahsoka's where she needs to be. Now it's about getting the story forwards with Thrawn and his return to the galaxy. And of course, we did learn a lot about Shin and Baylan. We got a live action introduction to Thrawn and Ezra as well. So overall, I think it's a solid episode. But as I mentioned earlier, it also leaves the possibility for many future stories to be told in this new galaxy that can be away from our current galaxy as well. But guys, thanks for watching. Let me know what you thought about the episode down below. What do you score out of 10? Remember to subscribe to the channel if you're new. Leave a like on today's video. Catch you in the next one. May the Force be with you.